Wow, I can't believe I'm doing this many videos in line. I really didn't want to go here. As I said back in July, I pretty much decided that YouTube was something I didn't want to be involved in that much, just periodically, not on a regular basis. But something's happened today that I need to at least address. Because we're seeing a lot of things happen in the government, the government shutdown, the debt ceiling coming along. Basically, the ability for the United States government to pay its bills. Now, I believe this has been orchestrated. I don't know that this is the kickoff point for the entire, dismantling of the U.S. government. However, last December, and I'll mention this to you. It was on Drudge Day. Let me show you this. Okay, last Christmas I talked about the fact that the Chinese fired that submarine missile off the coast of LA because of the possibility of default on the currency wars. Now here we go again. China warns USA on default. Also, this is on the Drudge report, and I apologize, Drudge. I hope this is okay. I hope you don't get upset about this, but I think it's important. Fact of the matter is that the Chinese are already here, as I pointed out. They have a presence in the Panama Canal. They control our ports on the West Coast, and I've received information. I don't know if it's bona fide, but it's something to be concerned about. That there are Chinese with organic armor, many thousands in Mexico, and that several aircraft in the neighborhood of dozens have landed in different air bases around the country with Chinese troops on board. What's going on? I'm not sure, but I do know that we've had this problem for a while, and here we go again. Maybe this October is the time when we're going to see some very dangerous situations occurring. Obama does not want Obamacare or the NDAA or any of these things to go away. Chinese promised or said that they wanted Obama to have a protracted war with American gun owners, and here we go. So it looks like possibly there might be some things going on here. Of course, if I was the Chinese, I wouldn't want you to default on a debt that you owe me either. But we're going to see some force on this. Okay, last December I made a video about China and the missile off the West Coast. I've mentioned that actually in a couple of recent videos as well. And that it was a warning shot that, we'd better not mess around with a currency war where the Chinese investments in the U.S. would lose their value. Well, now we have this on Drudge. In addition to that, we've talked about foreign troops being in the United States for various reasons, and there would be lots of them, which I'm not going to go into right now. But some of it has to do with the inability of the federal government to control rioting, civilian unrest, things like that. We see more and more states instituting nullification. And I've heard through the grapevine, and it is this the grapevine, I can't verify this, but that Obama may declare a state of emergency because the states are in insurrection over the NDAA, the federal gun laws, Obamacare, etc., etc. Not all of them. It's somewhat piecemeal, but it is there. Now, I don't consider it insurrection, of course. Basically, the states are saying, hey, federal government, you've overstepped your authority. You can't go there. But they're going to try to push it. As I said, they're going to use force on us to make us do what they want, whether or not it's right or not, as they fall from power or from influence or whatever, that they would use force on us. And that's coming. But this thing with China is kind of interesting because, as I mentioned in a couple of videos there with the situation with China, that it seems to be a love-hate relationship. Most of our senior politicians, the Bushes, for instance, have moved most of their investments to China, certainly Buffett and people like that, because that's the new, the new system. That's how they want to make their money, on the backs of the poor and basically the people that can't do anything but work for a slave system for profit for the big guys. Well, China's invested a lot in the U.S. I've heard about them being given land in Idaho, for instance. I don't know that that's gone through yet, but just as an example, it's south of Boise there. I think it was 50 square miles. And I'm not giving you any information where you can check up on this, and I apologize, but I'm just putting some pieces of the puzzle together. We have, again, like I said, that firing of the missile off the coast of LA in 2010 as a warning not to engage in this currency war and default on the debt to the Chinese in particular. And now with this thing with Drudge, at the same time today that came out, I received information, and thank you for sending it to me. I won't mention your name, your username, or anything else about you here. I think that's probably the best idea. That there were C-130s unloading, about 14 of them at one point, and that doesn't mean that was all of them. 14 C-130s unloading Chinese troops in full combat gear in the Ohio area, and then being boarded on other aircraft for deployment in various locations around the country. Now, why would the Chinese be doing this? Well, first of all, so they can assure through the government, which I imagine, and I can't prove this right now, but there have been agreements made where they will be able to obtain certain real property in the United States if we default on our debt to them. So they will go there as, not necessarily against the American people per se, but go there to secure their property, the repossession, so to speak, because our government has been so fraudulent in dealing with this and spending money that it didn't have, putting us into wars and in situations where we've had to pay, as Brand Thornton explained, interest on a debt that we really don't have, but it was orchestrated and our leaders signed on to it because they didn't really do their job. So is this really happening? We've been looking at events. We've talked about, as I've said before, foreign troops being here before, specifically the Chinese and the Russians. And I don't have any way of independently verifying that this landing in Ohio is true, or the deployment of those troops by other aircraft across the country is occurring, these Chinese troops, or the fact that we found out that there are Chinese troops in Mexico with their organic armor and military equipment, and there's been some real-time video on that. But I think given the circumstances, it's definitely a possibility. So it could be that this month, in October, as historically it's happened, some very devastating things could happen as far as economics are concerned. And the Chinese may just repossess what our government has unlawfully and unconstitutionally signed away to them in regards to the money that they have borrowed. So now the big question is, what do we do? Well, I don't know about you, but the Chinese government doesn't impress me. Yeah, they've done well in getting their economy going, but that's on the backs of their people, basically making them slaves. We've heard about Apple, for instance, and the nets that are around the facility there, the iPhone facility, where people are jumping to commit suicide because they're worked unmercifully. Is that what we really want, America? I don't think so. So the Chinese don't impress me. Of course, I'm not real impressed by the way the U.S. government's been working here lately either, but I certainly don't want to be under Chinese dictatorship. So anyway, I think some real difficult, complicated times are upon us if these reports are true. So prepare. I don't know how to tell you to stand up against a foreign occupation that's permitted because of a repossessed type of status, legally, but that the U.S. government will concede to them, which I think is a possibility. These things have been talked about in military-industrial intelligence complexes for quite some time. So I think it's definitely a possibility that we're seeing that happen right now. If anybody can independently verify any of this information about the Chinese coming in, and it probably also includes some Russians as well, and we know that they've been here, but the Chinese in particular, they have a huge, I think I mentioned this before, Costco, C-O-S-C-O, not Costco, the warehouse, but Costco, C-O-S-C-O, and the ports on the West Coast. All of those are Chinese companies, and the Chinese companies are fronts for Chinese military. So they have military here, certainly their hardware, their ammunition, their weapons, and those things. They've been here for a long time. And if they are in fact in Mexico, which I can see that would be a very likely possibility, they're certainly in Panama because we gave them the Panama Canal, then we could be seeing some really scary, difficult times here very quickly. I don't know who our friends are anymore. We've seen General Dempsey stand up against the administration about going into Syria. I'm surprised he's still the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but all of these things could be played out theatrically. You just don't know who your friends are anymore. It's just that way. Deceit and corruption are at every level, but it's apparently at our door. All those things that we were seeing, last spring and summer that we were concerned about. I think, as I said in another video, that possibly Alex Jones and some of us that were talking about some of these false flags may have actually put those false flags off because, how could we know about that information? And if people found out that we were putting it out prior to and then immediately after the event, people were saying, well, these guys talked about it, then that could have slowed things down. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened. I don't really know. I just know, as I've said before, that all of the preparations by the DHS, by the DOD, by the CIA, by the FBI, by these Chinese coming here, et cetera, foreign national troops, we have seen this going on. Gun owners considered terrorists, the Chinese saying that Obama should declare a protracted war against gun owners, and that the Chinese military would help. The entire thing about Christians. Look what's going on with in the military right now. We've been seeing this happen. For some time now, where Christians in particular have been prohibited from practicing their religion, their spiritual principles, even praying. The IRS went after, what kind of prayers are you saying in your meetings or whatever. There is a war on Christians in Syria. They're killing them. They're cutting their heads off. Young girls are cutting them, mutilating their bodies, doing terrible things to them. That's not happened here, but at least not on a wholesale scale. But certainly identifying them as enemies of the government, they have done that. As I said, gun owners, libertarians, people that believe in the Constitution, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, those kinds of things. So be on your guard. I'm sorry this has turned out a little longer than I really wanted to. I'm very tired. I keep track of a lot of these things, and I really didn't want to make regular videos, but when I see these things happening, as I said, I feel like it's my duty, my responsibility to at least mention them so that those who are out there can put their ears to the ground and their eyes on the horizon, as I've said so often. All right. Out here, I'm not sure when I'll get back with you. This thing with China is the most important thing right now, I think, because it could be the signal for other things to come. Let me know. Send me information if you see anything. Thank you very much. Bye.